Hello, and welcome back to Movie Husbands. Today we are reviewing Anora. Anora, a sex worker for Brooklyn, gets her chance at a Cinderella story when she meets and marries the son of an oligarch. Once the news reaches Russia, her fairy tale is threatened as the parents set out for New York to get the marriage annulled. The film is directed by Sean Baker and stars Mikey Madison and Mark Eydelshteyn. So Jeffrey, what did you think about Anora?
So I first encountered Sean Baker with his film Tangerine, and I'll admit that early on in my film-loving life, I really didn't identify with Sean Baker's work. He's almost like a Mike Lee for America's underprivileged, people that often live in the shadows. So he's a social realist filmmaker and writer, and much of his work can feel really languid and aimless. That's by design, but I had this really reductive view of his work early on, that it lacked wit or sharpness or the kind of craftsmanship that for me would elevate a film or show the handprints or fingerprints of a filmmaker. However, I do want to say that I was wrong, and I figured out I was wrong before we saw Anora, because once it won the Palme d'Or, I revisited The Florida Project, which I didn't like at the time. I was just really struck by his talent for naturalism and his deep, deep empathy for his characters. And no matter how I felt at the time, I was pretty happy with Sean Baker winning the Palme d'Or because he's such an unassuming filmmaker. I couldn't find the budget on Anora, but I couldn't imagine it's a lot. But even so, it's his highest budget feature to date, no doubt, just from the houses that they had to rent and some of the expensive stuff and being in Las Vegas. Before this, he made films for like $30,000, $1 million, $2 million. So it's really cool to see that type of filmmaker win such a high honor, in my opinion.
And also, I believe it's the first U.S. film to win the Palme d'Or in many, many years.
13 years.
Yeah.
The previous one was Tree of Life, which would you like to talk about how much you like that movie?
We can talk about that movie some other time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, I thought it was a wonderful film. I think that with Sean Baker's work, it actually revealed more how judgmental I was as a viewer rather than his talent as a filmmaker. Long story short, I've come to appreciate his work recently. And gosh, like Anora certainly feels like a step up even from that appreciation that I found recently. It's in his wheelhouse in all of these palpable ways, but the film has such a driving narrative compared to his other films, and it leans very hard into the comedic aspects of his work. So when Dennis Lin, one of the curators of New York Film Festival, introduced this film to us, he called it a modern day screwball comedy, and it's really hard to disagree with that notion. The film does complicate that a little bit towards the end, which I can't wait to talk about with you, but top to bottom in script writing, acting, direction, and pure entertainment, this is like an all-star.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Anora is very much a wild comedy. It's very unexpected. It does twists and turns. You don't know where it's heading, and that truly makes the experience very exciting. I think the film gets funnier and more unhinged as it goes.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, it does have this moment at the end of the film, which I think I would classify as like a thrust back to reality. But the first hour of the film, I think, is almost too run-of-the-mill to be a Palme d'Or winner. There's funny one-liners. Characters are loudly babbling to each other. There's generic montages of partying and drugs with music playing. You almost get the impression you're watching a sex worker version of a Superbad or Booksmart. It's not until things start to go awry about an hour in that the film really picks up steam and the humor starts to evolve in these very erratic ways. The sheer absurdity that takes over becomes this driving force that pulls the movie from scene to scene with ease and with so much fun. And so much so that I was really beginning to anticipate each forthcoming scene to see where exactly the film would take us. From this home invasion sequence that happens to the searching for one of the characters, Vanya. There's a bunch of car scenes related to finding him, to this brilliant courtroom scene that's hilarious, to the scenes towards the end of the film with Vanya's parents, I think were absolutely hilarious and probably a bit more weighty as well. You think of it as this youthful, fun love story, and then you find out it's a little bit more than that. And that's one of the reasons I love the film so much.
Yeah, I'm paraphrasing what Sean Baker said, but he said he never wanted you to be too comfortable as a viewer. He always wanted this feeling that he could pull out the rug from you at any time and you could be in a different type of film. And he does that at least 3 different times in this movie. Because as you mentioned, the first 40 to 50 minutes is this montage of people partying and the main character is falling in love and them doing drugs and they're in hot tubs in Vegas and lots and lots and lots of sexual intercourse.
Yes.
I was watching this and I was beginning to worry about like some of my past worries with Sean Baker. I said, okay, well, this is this is naturalism, I guess. If it's 2 hours and 20 minutes of this, I don't really know if I can do this. Are we just aimlessly drifting from party to party here? But luckily, the centerpiece of the film, that home invasion sequence, is just a masterclass of filmmaking with the stunt work, and people are being kicked and noses are being broken and people are being tied up. I don't want to spoil all the things that happens and how they happen, but it is just a blast. And I think it's 28 minutes in real time. It's great. It's really, really great.
Let's back up a little bit. Let's jump back a little bit to the premise of the movie. First, we meet Mikey Madison's character, Anora. She is a sex worker. She's working in this club and she's giving men lap dances. So we're getting a bunch of scenes of that. We're seeing interactions with her coworkers. There's one in particular, a person that she does not get along with it, who's constantly barraging her with just insults. Anora's character herself, she's so great at these little comebacks. She responds so quickly to people's insults or what they have to say about her with so much ferocity. She's a really great character here, and she's amazing as an actress in this role. But from there, she meets this guy, Vanya, who she doesn't know at the time is a Russian oligarch, and they sort of fall in love, I would say.
Yeah.
They go to Vegas, they get married, and that's when the parents find out, and we have to figure out where to go from there because the parents are not happy. It's the chaos that ensues in all of that. And also the underlying narrative of a story about love. It's about young love. It's about a love and infatuation. It's about a love that doesn't really know what love is.
She's believable as a lover. She's believable as a New Yorker. She's believable as a sex worker. She has to do a variety of things here, and she nails every one of them. But even the few scenes of emotional depth, I think she's particularly soaring in. I also want to talk about just some assets of Sean Baker's direction. His talents as a director, I think, are hard to decipher a lot of the time. He's a modest guy. He's not very showy with his camera. I don't really know how else to say this because it's so vague, but he just knows how to build a scene. So if we go back to that centerpiece, the way it's directed, the way that he directs actors, the way he lets the chaos ensue, the way he edits the scene, because he edited this film too, is just masterful. And again, he's not somebody who desperately needs to show you how good he is as a filmmaker. He's just somebody who lets it play out in a modest way that works for the film. And I think that's really effective. Another little thing that I like about his editing is his use of jump cuts. I think filmmakers forget that editing can be funny on top of acting. And he has a great way of using jump cuts to show you how a certain scene ended up. And the bluntness of it is quite funny.
I completely agree. I think on that topic of humor, besides the editing aspects and the quick cuts that are comedic in their own way, the film has so much humor that is tied to the conversational and the situational. The situations that our characters find themselves in are further made funny by the way that their personalities communicate with one another. Whether it's the loud and brash Anora, who knows just the perfect comeback to yell at any given time, the rich kid who acts with so little real-world experience and stupidity, the two reluctant side guys who would just rather be anywhere else but are forced to be there, the way they try to handle what they need to do and accomplish without being overly physical is absolutely hilarious because this modern day almost assumption of we're not supposed to, we can't assault people, but they're still bad people in a way. So I don't know. It's this weird, chaotic balance that's really, really funny. That is what so much of the comedy is centered around, is these character personality traits and how they interact with each other.
The film is really a farce. So like Sean Baker is leaving the social realist behind of the first 50 minutes to look at something that's more farcical, something that has a lot of outlandish wit to it. There's a particular like chaotic cacophony going on of all of these people screaming at one another, and you're feeling the tension and you're laughing so loud that it makes the whole film louder. But anyway, it's a very like tense and funny tone to explore within the film.
So from here, I'd like to get in a conversation that's a little bit deeper in a lot of the scenes that we saw because they were so funny and I do want to discuss them. But obviously this film isn't coming out for another 3 weeks. So if you haven't seen the film, I recommend coming back to this review after you've seen it. I want to talk about this scene that we were discussing earlier of the home invasion. It is super funny the way that this opens up because these two are having or starting to have sex as they've been doing every single day and every single hour since they met. This dude like gets up, is like flopping in his underwear as he goes to answer the door. All the meanwhile, this scene is actually intercutting with these scenes of a guy who's a little bit higher up on the chain, and he's currently at a family baptism, reaching in his pocket, trying to answer his phone during the moment which they're about to have the baptism. It's really, really hilarious. And then he's on this wild chase to get back to the house while all this is happening so that he could try to remedy the situation.
Doesn't he get a text too, like in the middle of holding the baby, and he's just like, And then he just leaves. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I got to leave. And that's when this movie, I think, really kicked into another gear.
Yes.
I was enjoying it up until that point, but I think from here on out, it's just absolute comedic gold.
Another bit of comedic gold that I really love was when Anora goes to Vanya's house for the first time and they have that first sexual experience in bed. He like strips and he like flips backwards onto the bed. These little details really illuminate us onto the personalities of these characters. Things like that end up being very important because they speak to his immaturity.
Totally. Yeah.
So going from there, I think there's a part in this film where the humor starts to butt up against reality. And that's when Vanya's parents arrive. They are going on this plane because they find out that they have to go all the way to Vegas to annul this marriage because they can't do it in the state in which they're currently living in. And this is where the humor starts butting up against these harsh realities. We get in the plane, we see his parents and the way that Vanya is interacting with them. He almost seems so much more like a child than he did before. What that leads to is, I think, Anora's character starting to realize there's this slow realization of what it is she's actually done here.
Up until that point, and Vanya had said this to her, I don't care what my parents think, we're going to stay married, all of this stuff. And I think for Vanya's character, it was more about defying his parents than it was about being in love with Anora. It is this slow realization, probably right before she's about to get on the plane, and it comes down with this thundering revelation that he says, of course I'm going to divorce you. Of course we're going to annul this. As if like she should have understood it was a fantasy the whole time. The film still has some funny scenes after that, but that's when the tone starts to quietly change from all-out farce back down to realistic drama.
Coming to the end of this film, we have one of the people that's been along on this journey. Igor. Yeah. I love his character because he has this innocence about him. He just looks so kind about it.
Yeah, he talks about his grandmother.
Yeah.
He lives with his grandmother.
He's the one that stays with Anora one more night in the house and then takes her home. And it's in this final car scene where he ends up giving her the engagement ring. I think this touches her in a lot of ways, but it's also the first time I would say that somebody actually is showing care for her, like her well-being. This is a moment I think that just absolutely breaks her because she breaks down crying and they just hug, and that's where the film ends.
You took out a crucial part of that, which is that she tries to have sex with Igor.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So no, that
is very crucial.
Yeah, no, I think it is very crucial. And I say this with zero judgment, but it's her profession and her livelihood. And I think this scene, it's almost second nature that she responds to his heartfelt benevolence by seducing him. Like it's a role she's played many, many times in her work life that I think that her natural response is to do that. However, when Igor tries to kiss her, which in my mind takes the act from a purely sexual, physical interaction to a romantic one, she refuses, and that's when she starts to cry. There's a realization on her part that her sexual identity is used really inauthentically for most of her life. So much so that Igor's kiss is an attempt at authenticity that seems jarring to her.
Yeah.
And that revelation, it shows her that she has to change her relationship with sex at some point. Additionally, and this gets into, we actually haven't talked about the issue of class in the film yet, but class is always on Sean Baker's mind, and it certainly is here. I think Vanya gave her an invitation out of this life where she needs to sell herself, and now she can live in a worry-free, high-class existence. But in the realization that both her fairy tale love story and the ticket to upward mobility is gone, I think she just breaks down.
Wow. You nailed that.
Oh, sorry.
Well, no, it's fine. That's pretty much all I had written down as well. So I really don't have much to add. I completely agree. I think she spent so much time using her body as her profession that in this moment, she's assuming she needs to do the same thing. The ring is the payment for her sex. So yes, I can't believe I skipped saying that. I really should have because I
I was like, that's very it's like that's a very important part of the movie.
It just got away from me, I think. Saw 8 films in 3 days already at New York Film Festival.
We have more to go.
And I can't remember if it was Sean Baker or another director, but either way, the point still stands. They had said the ending is so vitally important to the film that if you do not get the ending right, it's probably not going to be a good film.
That is Sean Baker, and he's definitely known for his endings. Like The Florida Project has a very notable ending. I'm not sure the movie works without it, but I want to give him the ultimate compliment, which is how you go from a farcical screwball comedy to something like this and have it work is really a magic trick. I don't think I know many directors that can pull off something like that. The way our crowd reacted to it. Our crowd, we saw this with 1,000 other people at Alice Tully Hall. People were like rolling in the aisles. It was like one of the loudest, most laugh-filled screenings I've ever been to of a film. And I can't tell you the absolute dead silence of the last scene, which tells you how much the scene was working for the crowd. To see that varied reaction from that crowd work, it's just, it shows how effective that it really was. I'm not sure that I would love this film as much as I do without that ending. I think it's wonderfully entertaining and terrific all the way through, but the ending brings a nuance and a different layer to things that I think really puts it into an upper echelon.
So you ready to go to grades?
I am. I'm going to give Anora an A-. I thought it was one of my favorite films of the year. I thought it was an absolute just blast from beginning to end. I can't think of many ways that the film could have been done better. It maybe could have been a little bit tighter, but that's just not Sean Baker's style. All of his films are a little loose and they're a little too long. This is the first time that it really works for me in a profound way. As I said at the top of the review, I've always had to work a little bit harder to like Sean Baker's films because they're just not really in my wheelhouse. And this one, I think, certainly was. And again, that ending is just so impactful. I'm very, very happy to be a Sean Baker devotee.
I completely agree. This was certainly one of the most hilarious films of the year. I give it a B+. Pretty much would have given it a higher grade if it wasn't for that first hour. I think the first hour drags a little bit and it seems almost just too usual to any comedic screwball comedy out there.
Yeah, and it's shaggy.
Some of the camera movements and the angles and all the stuff in the club, I don't know. There was nothing very interesting about it to me, visually speaking or narratively speaking. And it wasn't until that home invasion scene where I was really entirely gripped. If the movie was like the home invasion scene and afterwards, the whole way through, I would have easily given this movie an A- or even maybe an A. Sean Baker did mention in the Q&A that the home invasion scene was the starting point of this film. After knowing that information, the more I think about it, the more I think of we need to fill in the gap before this very exciting scene. And I don't think there's anything that filled in before that scene that made the film as intoxicating as everything that came after it.
Yeah, I think that's totally understandable.
All right, and that's it for our review of Anora. Anora will be in theaters on October 18th, so be sure to go check it out. Let us know in the comments, what did you think about this film? As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.